Dren's heart thudded against his ribcage as the chains securing his wrists jolted with the docking clamp. Through the reinforced viewport of the alien transport, he glimpsed the luminous expanse of a massive orbital station, a spiraling lattice of gold and obsidian known as Sindara Prime. Market of monarchs. Nest of collectors. Graveyard of rights. Only 3 years ago, Earth had been inducted into the Galactic Accord. 1 year ago, Kale had been honorably discharged from the Terran vanguard after serving on the Vezari front. And now? Now he was cargo. Stan! Barked the voice of his captor, a scaled, insectoid merchant known as Trakvas. His mouth clicked behind a facial mask as he gestured with 4 claw-tipped digits. The translator implanted in Kale's neck translated the speech into harsh, clipped English. Preparation for exhibition begins. Kale stood slowly, his posture rigid from years of military conditioning. Even after all this, he wouldn't bow. Wouldn't break. This is illegal, Kale said flatly. Humans are protected species under Accord law. Trakvas hissed a mechanical laugh. You are not being harmed. Not being enslaved. Your species is preserved. His multifaceted eyes narrowed. As collectibles. Kale's jaw clenched, every fiber of his being screaming rebellion as the guards, tall, stone-skinned brutes from a race he didn't recognize, marched him down the glossy corridor. He counted every camera. Every turret. Every guard's sidearm. His soldier's mind was cataloging everything. But there was no path to escape. Not yet. The preparation chamber was sterile white, every surface gleaming. 2 silent attendants approached, their hairless skin like living marble, and without a word began scanning, grooming, and dressing him in a sleeveless black garment that did little to preserve dignity. Not bad for a human, one murmured as they recorded his biometrics. Lean build. High neural activity. Psychological resilience notable. The other tapped on a floating interface. Trakvas observed like a gallery curator. List him as combat tested. Include visuals from the Vezari siege if you can pull them from the Accord's war archive. Add display-worthy musculature and rare Terran eye color. Some collectors love a novelty. Kale said nothing. His silence was the only weapon he had left. But that would soon change. The domed gallery was vast, miles across and constructed entirely of transparent alloy, offering a dizzying view of the nebulae swirling beyond Sindara Prime. Hundreds of alien species filled the tiers and ornate balconies, their wealth visible in crystalline robes, shimmering exquisites, or living jewelry. Kale stood atop a slowly rotating display platform, one of 7 sentients on auction. But he was the only human. Above, stars drifted like indifferent gods. Below, predators in silks and scales whispered in alien tongues, discussing his value. A disembodied voice rang through the air, smooth as oil. Lot 61. 1 Kale Dren. Species, Homo sapiens. Status, veteran of the Vezari conflict. Honors, Crimson Cross. Duration, 6-year combat service. Scar tissue, verified. Emotional volatility, high. Adaptability, exceptional. Murmurs spread. They still die under a century, don't they? Hissed a thin-boned creature with liquid silver eyes. Such rapid entropy. Yes, came a whispering reply. But fascinating in their chaos. Like candles burning at both ends. Kale remained motionless. Unflinching. They wanted a trophy, they'd get a statue. A thin being approached his platform. Avian in form, with feathers woven into a formal crest, it peered at Kale with a curious tilt. It understands us? Kale's lips twitched. It does. And it's sick of this parade. Gasps rippled through the balconies. Laughter followed from some quarters. Others recoiled in distaste. To them, defiance from a specimen was quaint, amusing, or dangerous. The bids began low, cautious. A few thousand credits here. A reluctant increase there. The numbers rose, but the excitement did not. Kale could hear it. He was too common. Too short-lived. Too angry. And then silence. until the door at the far end of the chamber boomed open. Cale's heartbeat slowed. The crowd turned as one, voices falling to stillness. A name echoed through the gallery, spoken not by a voice, but by instinct, fear, and awe. Valeriana of the Searing Flame. Sovereign of the Vulpine Dominion. Cale blinked as she appeared, tall, lithe, and devastatingly alien. Her orange fur shimmered beneath woven robes of obsidian silk, and her 9 tails, yes, 9, curled like living fire behind her. She walked with unhurried confidence, clawed toes clicking on the alloy floor. Her ears twitched once. Her golden eyes, slit-pupilled and intense, scanned the stage. And locked on him. Valeriana's approach was silence incarnate. Cale couldn't look away. She was beautiful in the way of volcanoes. Dangerous, untamed, and undeniable. She stopped before his platform. "This one," she said. Trakvas appeared instantly, bowing so low his mandibles scraped the floor. "Your Radiance! An honor. The specimen is of Terran make. Temperamental, but I heard him speak." Her voice was velvet and flame. "He has fire. I want him. You honor us. Current bid is 5,000,000 credits, Valeriana said flatly. Paid now. A sound left the crowd, somewhere between a collective gasp and a swallowed scream. Trakvas twitched. "Of course, Your Grace." "At once." Cale stared stunned. What did this vulpine monarch want with him? And then she met his eyes. "I know what you are, Cale Dren," Valeriana said softly. "And I know what you could become." Before he could answer, the transfer was approved. And his fate was sealed. The transport wasn't what Cale expected. He was no longer in chains. No longer herded by guards. Instead, he sat in a chamber awash with warm amber light, its walls carved from a smooth black material that pulsed faintly with organic energy. A table of crystal and bones stood untouched before him, stacked with delicacies from 6 worlds. Food. Water. Cushioned seats. No cell. No restraints. Only silence. The doors parted without a sound, and she entered. Queen Valeriana. Now that they were alone, Cale saw her not through the lens of spectacle, but up close, real. Her fur shimmered a rich orange under the lighting, fading to cream beneath her chin. Her limbs were long, graceful, her claws hidden unless she chose to reveal them. Her eyes were molten gold, sharp and intelligent. And her voice, when she spoke, curled around him like a whisper beside a campfire. "You haven't eaten." Cale stood, unsure if he should salute, or bow or stand his ground. "Didn't feel right eating luxury meals I didn't earn." A slow smile bared a hint of fong. "So very human." He folded his arms. "Why did you buy me?" Her gaze sharpened. "Do you think you were purchased like chattel? That is how auctions usually work. I paid a price to remove you from a system that treats sentience like sculpture," she said coolly. "That does not mean you are mine. You are under my protection." Cale arched a brow. "That's a lot of credits to spend on charity." Valeriana walked slowly around the table, her tails drifting behind her like smoke trails. "You think small. I did not buy a man. I acquired a potential ally." "Ally?" Cale echoed. "Your Federation may call itself advanced, but its spine is brittle. I've read your file, Cale Dren. I've seen the battle footage. You led an entire defense perimeter on Vezari 4 while your reinforcements were vaporized. You adapted to terrain, manipulated the enemy with false data, and evacuated 2,000 civilians using nothing but scavenged transports and a half-dead comms unit." She stopped inches from him. "I value that." Cale's breath caught. No one in the Federation had ever said it like that. Even after the medal. Even after the discharge. "And now what?" he asked. "No," she said, brushing past him to the viewport. "I show you my home. And if you wish, I show you your future." The stars outside flared. A planet grew in the distance, bright and burning, a world of copper deserts, spiraled forests, and rings that glimmered like a crown. Ember Throne. The heart of the Vulpine Dominion. Kale said nothing as the ship descended, but inside, something was beginning to shift. Not just curiosity now. Something more. The landing was so smooth Kale barely felt the ship touch down. When the doors opened, a wave of dry, sweet air met him, scented with something like spiced citrus and desert bloom. Outside, the landing platform stretched toward a mountain ridge crowned with molten orange clouds. Structures of impossible geometry rose from cliffsides, not built but grown. Biometal and crystal shaped by living architects. This was no Federation world. This was something older. Valeriana walked beside him, flanked by 4 silent honor guards clad in shimmering black armor that flowed with their movements like cloth. Every being they passed along the palace corridor, a kaleidoscope of furred, horned, and feathered creatures, bowed their heads, then quickly looked away. Not from her. From him. He leaned toward her. "They're afraid of me." She didn't stop walking. "They're afraid of what you represent. Which is change." Inside the palace, the atmosphere shifted. Every hall curved, lit by glowing roots embedded in the walls. Kale was led to a chamber that could only be described as regal. Warm sandstone flooring. A garden growing vertically on one wall, scented with alien herbs. Furniture sized for humans. A wardrobe stocked with clothing, some Federation standard, some woven from vulpine silks. "This is my room?" Kale asked, skeptical. "Your suite," Valeriana corrected. "You may move freely within the western wing. I've ordered your environmental controls calibrated to Earth norms." Kale narrowed his eyes. "Why the hospitality?" Valeriana stopped, her tails slowly curling. "Because you're not a pet, Kale Dren. You are here to learn. To adapt. And if you are willing, to help me rebuild something ancient that was lost to my people." He watched her, uncertain. "I was brought here for a reason, wasn't I?" She turned, her silhouette outlined in the warm glow of her planet's twin suns. "You were brought here for many." Kale didn't press. He wouldn't get real answers yet. But something in her voice, the way it dipped just slightly on those final words, told him she wasn't lying. After she left, Kale explored the suite. Hidden security was everywhere. Biometric locks on doors. Microscopic drones buzzing silently in corners. The illusion of freedom, but freedom all the same, at least for now. As he sat by the open terrace, overlooking a forest of gold-leaved trees that shifted with the breeze, he whispered to himself. Still a prison. But even he had to admit, it was the most beautiful prison he'd ever seen. Kale's first few days in the Ember Throne Palace passed in a strange, surreal rhythm. Every morning an attendant, a quiet older male with ash-gray fur and a data tablet perpetually in hand, would deliver a list of suggested activities. Tours of the palace. Observation of military drills. Sessions in the Dominion's library, where living walls whispered the histories of her people. Kale followed some. Ignored others. But he was always watched. And always, there was Queen Valeriana. She appeared in unexpected moments. Sometimes simply passing by during his walk through the palace gardens, other times inviting him to share meals in a chamber built like a nest of woven flame glass. Each time, Kale found himself studying her. Her posture, the sway of her 9 tails, the sharp flicks of her ears when she was amused or annoyed. He couldn't get a read on her. Was she grooming him for something political? Trying to seduce a war hero into loyalty? Or was it something more complex? On the 6th night, Kale was summoned again, this time not by an attendant, but by the Queen herself. 2 guards escorted him through a spiraling corridor of shifting red light, and then into a chamber unlike any he'd seen before. The floor was obsidian glass. In the center, a pool shimmered with glowing liquid. Around them, holographic runes hovered midair, each one ancient, jagged, pulsing with raw data. Valeriana waited at the far end, no robes, no crown, only a sleeveless wrap that clung to her athletic form, her orange fur brushed to perfection. Her golden eyes shimmered like twin stars. "What is this place?" Kale asked, cautious. The Hall of Inheritance, she replied, where our ancestors stored truths too dangerous for the court. She walked to the pool's edge and gestured. Look! Cale stepped forward. In the liquid surface, images swirled, some holographic, others embedded in memory. He saw thousands of vulpine figures, warriors, scientists, monarchs, standing proud in triumph or weeping in ruin. We were once a people of boundless genetic mastery, she said quietly. We eliminated disease, expanded our minds, sharpened our bodies. Cale watched the images shift. Children born in labs, elders with perfect physiques, generations growing sterile. But in our pursuit of perfection, we made ourselves fragile. Our minds dulled from lack of challenge. Our genetic lines too narrow. Now only one of my kind remains capable of breeding. You, Cale whispered. She nodded once. And your people think I, a human, can fix that? Not all of them, Valeriana said. But the ancient databanks say this. In times of decline, new blood must enter the flame. Cale stepped away, his heart pounding. This is what you meant when you said I wasn't bought like a pet. His voice was low. I'm a genetic key. I didn't lie, she said. I chose you. But not only for that. I've seen what you are. Not just your body, but your mind. You think like us, yet differently. Tactically. Emotionally. Adaptively. Her tail brushed the floor. You could be more than just the key to our survival. You could be the start of something better. Cale's throat tightened. And if I say no? Valeriana met his gaze without blinking. Then I return you to Federation space. No chain. No cage. I don't need obedience, Cale. I need truth. He didn't answer right away. But as he looked back down into the swirling light of her ancestors, he knew his life had crossed the threshold. And there was no going back. Cale awoke the next morning to a summons, not from an attendant, but from Valeriana herself, her voice echoing in his mind. It shouldn't have been possible. But it was. Meet me in the fire court. Come prepared to bleed. The connection vanished. He sat upright in bed, heart hammering. It hadn't been a dream. He'd heard her, inside his thoughts. There had been no sound, no translator lag. Just pure comprehension, crisp and electric. He dressed quickly, choosing the flexible training attire offered in his wardrobe, black and rust-colored fabric woven with threads of metallic fiber for impact resistance. As he stepped into the corridor, 2 guards waited. Neither spoke as they escorted him to a circular courtyard open to the sky, its stone floor scorched and cracked. Around it, spectators watched from elevated perches. And at the center stood Valeriana, already in position. Gone was the royal elegance. She wore tight combat wraps that revealed the sculpted lines of her frame. Her claws were extended, and her orange fur bristled under the sun's light. Her 9 tails moved like fire given form. Cale stepped into the ring. You said I'd bleed? She smirked. You survived Vezari 4. Let's see if you can survive me. The duel began in a blur. Valeriana struck first, fast and low, claws whistling through the air as Cale barely dodged. He rolled under her follow-up strike and swept low, forcing her to leap back with an effortless twist of her tails. She's faster than anyone I've ever fought. He shifted tactics. Rather than chase her pace, he began predicting, watching her hips, her shoulder angles, the flick of her ears before she struck. She noticed. Good, she said between flurries. You're learning. That's why you're here. I thought I was here to save your gene pool. Cale grunted, ducking a spinning kick. Maybe, she purred. But if you can't adapt, you'll die before you ever get the chance. Their bodies clashed, then parted, then clashed again, an elegant chaos. He countered her next move with a feint, then followed with a shoulder roll and drove his elbow into her ribs. She let out a satisfied growl and twisted, using her momentum to flip him onto the scorched stone. He hit hard. Stars flared behind his eyes. His ribs ached. Valeriana stood over him, tailtip gently tapping his cheek. Yield? Kale spat blood, grinned, and rolled back to his feet. Not a chance. The crowd above made a sound, low and murmuring. It wasn't mockery. It was approval. She struck again, but slower this time. Controlled. Testing. Kale responded in kind. What had started as a fight turned into something else. A conversation. A symphony of movement. When they finally broke apart, panting, bruised, and exhilarated, Valeriana raised a hand. Enough. Kale nodded, wiping sweat and blood from his face. So, was that a test? It was, she said. And you passed. He exhaled, then noticed the sudden shift in her posture. Her tail stilled. What is it? He asked. Valeriana's voice dropped. Someone has been watching these duels too closely. A counselor I no longer trust. Kale's spine straightened. We're not alone in this palace, she said darkly. And some don't want the Dominion to survive in hybrid form. He narrowed his eyes. A coup? Not yet. But it's coming. And I'll need someone I can trust to see it before it strikes. Kale reached for a towel, then stopped. He didn't say it out loud. But inside, he knew. He was already committed. Not for the credits. Not for the genetics. But for her. 2 nights later, Kale found himself crouched on a high ledge overlooking the Chamber of Council, cloaked in shadows that danced from the soft biolights along the ceiling. Below, 12 high-ranking Dominion officials stood in a semicircle, their fur dyed in ceremonial markings of red and bone white, whispering among themselves in low, heated tones. He wasn't supposed to be here. Officially, Kale had retired to his quarters following another brutal sparring match with Valeriana, but she had offered a final whisper in his mind before parting. Check the Eastern Observation alcove. Tonight. He had expected politics. He hadn't expected betrayal. And now she trains with the human, one elder rasped. His ears were pierced with heavy rings, each representing a decade served on the High Council. He weakens her with foreign sentiment. Emotion. Uncertainty. Emotion is not weakness, countered a female voice, softer, but no less sharp. She's grown stronger since his arrival. Bolder. Too bold, the first snarled. If she mates with him, she risks corrupting the bloodline forever. Hybrid children. What of our purity? There it was. The rot at the core of the Dominion. Kale's jaw clenched. Another elder, lean and tall with slitted green eyes, flicked his tail in disdain. We do not object to her finding companionship. But crowning him her consort? That cannot be allowed. The female counselor again. You assume she intends that. She will. You know Valeriana's heart, as I do. Her kind love fiercely. And he's changed her. The tall one stepped forward. Then we must act. Quietly. Before bloodlines blur and tradition is lost. And if she resists? Came the hesitant reply. Then we do what our ancestors did when a sovereign lost their way. Kale's stomach dropped. That was no metaphor. This was more than whispers. It was a plan. He slinked back from the ledge, slipping silently down a winding service passage he'd memorized days ago during one of his exploratory walks. His instincts screamed caution, but his thoughts burned with fury. When he returned to his quarters, Valeriana was already waiting inside. She stood by the glass wall, her tails twitching slowly, her reflection cast across the garden beyond. No crown. No guards. Just her. You heard it, she said softly. Kale nodded. They're moving against you. They see me as a threat. I know. Why tell me to spy then, if you already knew? She turned to face him, her eyes unreadable. Because I needed to see what you'd do when faced with betrayal. Kale paced the floor. They're planning to dethrone you. Maybe worse. She approached him, her voice low. There's an ancient law. A right of challenge. If I face a trial by combat and intellect, I may prove my path forward has merit, even if the old guard disagrees. And if you lose? Valeriana didn't blink. Then I die. And they erase everything we've begun. He took a breath. Then you're not doing this alone. She tilted her head. You'd stand with me? Even knowing the risks? He stepped forward, close enough to feel the warmth of her fur, the subtle tension in her muscles. I was trained to fight impossible odds. But you gave me something to fight for again. So yeah. I'm in. For the first time since he'd arrived on Ember Throne, she looked shaken. Then slowly, her claws curled around his hand. Then we prepare, she whispered, for the trial of flame. The next morning, Kale awoke before dawn. Outside his chamber window, the twin suns of Ember Throne barely crested the horizon, casting long shadows across the rust-colored stone of the palace. The air shimmered faintly, touched with the scent of heated minerals and distant fires. Valeriana met him in the lower barracks, an area once reserved for war generals, now sealed off for private training. No attendants. No spectators. Just them. She wore battle wraps again, her orange fur slightly damp with sweat from an earlier routine. Her 9 tails swept the ground behind her, and in her hands, 2 obsidian shore blades that curved like fangs. Today, she said without preamble, we train for endurance. Dominion trials are more than combat. They test wit, resilience, pain tolerance. Every tradition that shaped our ancestors will be forced upon us. Kale cracked his neck, adjusting the reinforced vest he wore. Good. Pain's the only thing that ever felt honest. She smirked, just slightly, and tossed him a curved blade. Its hilt molded perfectly to his grip. Not by coincidence. She'd chosen it for him. Their training was brutal. Kale was fast, precise, creative, but Valeriana was relentless. She pushed him to the brink of collapse. When he dropped from exhaustion, she forced him up. When he bled, she applied salves without ceremony. When he faltered in form, she corrected him with a flash of claws across his skin. You think your Earth military made you strong? She growled as he staggered. It made you disciplined. That's not the same. Kale gritted his teeth and lunged at her, faster than she expected. His blade caught her side, slicing shallow through the fur. She hissed, eyes wide. But instead of anger, there was pride. Better, she breathed. They trained like that for hours. Combat, strategy, puzzles, endurance runs through the molten caverns beneath the palace, memory tests under neurological strain. Days bled together, marked only by the pain and progress of shared hardship. At night, they collapsed together in silence, sometimes beside the garden pools, sometimes on cold stone training mats, occasionally in each other's arms without speaking a word. It was during one of these quiet nights, when Valeriana sat beside him in the glow of a fire pit, her tails coiled around them like a cocoon, that Kale finally asked, Why me, really? You could have picked anyone in that auction. Anyone with compatible DNA. She was silent a long moment. Then she said, Because you were angry. He blinked. That's your reason? You were angry, but you didn't break. Her voice was low, fierce. Most humans sold to collectors either raged without purpose or collapsed into despair. But you stood like you dared someone to take your soul from you. I recognized it. Because I've lived with that same fury. She turned to look at him directly, her gaze softened by something rare, vulnerability. Also, she added, your scent isn't terrible. Kale chuckled, but there was heat rising in his chest, a warmth that wasn't from the fire. They said nothing more that night, only leaned against one another as the flames flickered. But a silent agreement passed between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The horns of Ember Throne sounded at dawn, 3 low, resonating blasts that vibrated the very foundation of the palace. Kale stood at the window of his suite, already dressed in the ceremonial armor Valeriana had prepared for him. Black plates over a crimson undersuit, lightweight but impossibly durable, forged from Dominion alloy. The crest of the queen, 9 flaming tails curled around a blade, gleamed across his chest. It was official now. The trial of flame had been declared. Outside, courtiers gathered in droves across the spiral courtyard, their voices hushed, heads tilted upward as palace banners unfurled in volcanic winds. From the highest spire, a new symbol flared into life, Valeriana's personal sigil intertwined with the stylized wings of Earth's ancient warbird. A declaration of intent. A challenge to every traditionalist watching. By the time Kale reached the Hall of Judgment, it was already packed. Elevated balconies held council elders, noble houses, military commanders, and off-world diplomats. Kale spotted Ambassador Yexon of the Galactic Accord, an insectoid dignitary with glistening wings, seated with unreadable poise. The Federation was watching. But the one he watched for was already waiting at the center of the chamber. Valeriana. She wore formal battle regalia, her fur polished, her tails woven with gold cords. Her headdress, minimalist compared to the usual royal flair, left her face open, unapologetically proud. She stood in full view of the court, jaw set, gaze unshaken. Kale joined her at the dais, his steps slow and deliberate. His presence drew gasps, murmurs, even a few growls of disapproval. A human? Standing beside the queen? Let them whisper. He was done caring what anyone thought. Councillor Rizik stepped forward from the line of elders, his long white fur swept back, ceremonial blade at his hip. Queen Valeriana, you declare intent for the trial of flame? I do, she said, her voice echoing across the chamber. And you claim your right to defend the throne by ritual challenge rather than abdication? I do. Riazik's eyes narrowed. And your consort, this Terran male, he stands beside you willingly? Kale didn't wait for a cue. He stepped forward. I do. There was a long pause. Then Councillor Riazik turned, lifting his voice for all to hear. So it shall be. In accordance with the ancient rites, a trial of body, mind, and spirit will determine whether Queen Valeriana and her chosen consort are fit to guide the Dominion into the next era. He raised a clawed hand toward the upper tiers. Let the challengers step forth. A section of the crowd parted. And from it emerged Lord Viral, a tall, frost-pelted noble with silver eyes and an expression carved from granite. Flanking him were two warriors, both taller than Kale, both clearly enhanced, genetically bred for combat. Viral's voice rang with cold finality. We accept. The chamber rang with ceremonial gongs. Kale turned to Valeriana, her tail brushing his ankle as they stood side by side. You ready? He asked quietly. She bared her teeth. To make history? He nodded. Born ready. The trial's first phase began not in the arena, but beneath it. Kale and Valeriana descended together through a spiral passage hidden behind the throne dais. The walls here were ancient, carved by tools no longer remembered, lit only by veins of living crystal that pulsed with a dim, silvery light. The air grew colder with each step, tinged with ozone and old metal. Kale could feel it pressing on his skin, the weight of tradition, of expectation. This wasn't just some game. It was a gauntlet designed by monarchs who had never envisioned outsiders, never a human, walking these halls. They arrived in a chamber that resembled a shattered observatory. The ceiling was a dome of fractured starlight, and in its center hovered a shifting construct of cubes, spheres, and tangled energy strands. It pulsed and shifted with slow menace. The puzzle core. A test of intelligence, perception, and unity. Lord Viral's team stood across from them, stoic, prepared. The two warriors with him were near identical, their white pelts and sleek armor reflecting the light of the core. Their stares never left Kale. A disembodied voice spoke overhead in the ancient tongue, automatically translated through Kale's implant. The task: deactivate the core. Together. Or perish in discord. Valeriana turned to him. This thing is older than our archives. Each incorrect move resets the sequence. Fail 5 times and the entire chamber purges, brutally. Kale gave a tight nod. So, let's not screw up. They approached the puzzle carefully. 3 hovering nodes waited, glowing faint orange. When Valeriana reached for the first, a dozen symbols appeared midair, some moving, some fading, some change in color. Kale instantly saw a pattern. It's an algorithm, he muttered. But built in four-dimensional logic. You can read this? She asked, glancing sideways. Not yet, Kale said, stepping closer. But I can learn it. While Viral's team already activated their first node and moved to the second, Kale shut his eyes and tried to slow his breathing. He wasn't going to outmatch bioengineered warriors in strength, but this was different. This was problem-solving under pressure. Valeriana placed her pawed hand beside his on the interface. You see the spin rate of those glyphs? Yeah. Every one spins at a slightly different speed. I think they're counting down. She nodded. And if we don't match them? Kale smirked. Then the floor probably eats us. He worked fast, reorienting symbols, shifting layers, realigning the interface with Valeriana's help. Her instincts were sharp. She spotted patterns he missed, made intuitive leaps he couldn't. Together they moved like a single mind split across two species. By the time Viral's team reached the final node, Kale and Valeriana activated their second. Sparks hissed in the air. The puzzle core flared red. Fast, Valeriana murmured. Too fast. They're not solving, they're brute forcing it. That'll catch up with them, Kale said. Watch. Sure enough, Viral's team made a wrong move. An incorrect sequence flashed that set off a shriek of warning. Their core reset. Viral barked a curse in his native dialect. Kale grinned. Told you. He turned back to their final node. This one was alive. The moment they approached, it projected holograms of Valeriana and Kale, flickering with their heart rates, body temperatures, even neural patterns. The core wasn't asking for logic. It was asking for synchronization. It wants our minds linked, Kale said, stunned. Valeriana reached for his hand, claws retracted. Then let it see us. They stepped forward together, hands touching the final node. A wave of sensation crashed through Kale's thoughts, memories not his, emotions he'd never felt. Her fears. Her loneliness. Her pride. Her rage. He opened himself in return, offering pain, loss, love. War memories. The auction. Her face. The node turned gold. And in the blink of a breath, it shut down. Puzzle core deactivated. The chamber roared with firelight as a signal flared across the dome. Valeriana and Kale had finished, first. Above them, nobles stirred in their seats. Some whispered. Some stared in stunned silence. But a few, just a few, stood and clapped. A day of rest was granted between trials, though Kale quickly realized that rest in the Dominion meant barely restrained tension cloaked in ceremony. Every corridor he walked buzzed with whispers. Not of scorn, but of conflict. Some had begun to support Valeriana's challenge. Others called her a heretic. No one was neutral. Even the palace guards began splitting into visible factions, some wearing her crest proudly, others with their badges faded or missing. The trial was changing not just laws but hearts. And that made it dangerous. The second trial was announced by morning horn blasts, and a plume of fire that shot from the summit of the Ember Spire. Kale dressed without a word, donning reinforced battle gear this time, Dominium armor with a Terran-style cut, built for speed over brute defense. Valeriana met him just outside the lower war courtyard. She wore no headdress, her fur slicked from oil applied by tradition. Her blades were sheathed across her back, and 2 rings of braided gold wrapped around the base of her central tail, a symbol of royal combat declaration. She looked him over. Sleep well? No, Kale said, rolling his shoulders. You didn't try. They entered the arena together. It was not a simple ring. It was a shifting battleground. Modular platforms rose and fell in real time, suspended above lava pits and electrical conduits. Projection walls altered the terrain on command, creating illusions of sand, storm, ice, and even vacuum. Above, 1,000 eyes watched. The voice of the counselor echoed from the pillars overhead. Trial 2, the Crucible. Test of unity and survival. No allies. No resets. No safety. Kale muttered. Who writes your trial rules? Valeriana grinned, just enough to bear Fong. We don't write them. We survive them. A bell rang. The floor beneath them tilted. And then chaos. Platforms slid apart. Walls dropped. A sandstorm projection filled the arena, complete with slicing microparticles and disorienting sound pulses. Kale's HUD struggled to recalibrate as the map flickered. 2 on the right! Valeriana shouted, eyes scanning through the dust. Not projections! Kale pivoted as 2 challengers leapt from behind a falling wall, one wielding a chain spear, the other some form of magnetized blade that sparked with each swing. He ducked the first strike, countered with an elbow, then used his opponent's momentum to throw them into the illusionary sand wall, which wasn't as fake as it looked. It hardened mid-impact, stunning the attacker. Valeriana danced through her opponent like wine through flame, graceful, lethal, unstoppable. Her claws flashed once, twice, and her challenger collapsed in a heap, clutching their chest. New threat! Kale warned, spotting one of Viral's loyalists repositioning a plasma turret module from above. Valeriana's tails flared wide, absorbing the shot as she shielded Kale with her body. He blinked, stunned. You didn't have to. I choose to, she growled. Now move! Together, they surged forward, Kale disabling the turret while she cleared the upper ridge. His human unpredictability, jagged movements, illogical footwork, caught his opponent off guard. The Dominion had trained in perfect form for generations. Kale brought improvisation. By the final minutes, they stood back to back as the arena shifted into its last form, floating platforms above a bottomless pit. Last round, Valeriana said, her breathing shallow but steady. Kale nodded, eyes narrowing. Let's finish this. Their final challengers arrived, twin elite guards hand-selected by Counselor Viral. They moved in sync, faster than the others. Trained killers. One for Kale. One for Valeriana. The fight stretched them. Kale took hits, too many, but adapted, using timing and terrain. At one point he dropped off a platform, caught the edge mid-fall, and launched upward to drive a knee into his attacker's chin. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Valeriana faced her match, an assassin bred for speed, matching her tail for tail, counter for counter. Then Kale saw the opening. He kicked his opponent backward into a collapsing platform and flung his blade toward Valeriana's foe, just enough of a distraction for her to finish it with a brutal downward strike. Silence. Then the bell rang. Trial complete. The arena began to cool, platforms stabilizing. Kale dropped to a knee, panting, bloodied, and grinning. Valeriana stood tall, though her left arm was scorched and her side bled through the wrap. She extended her hand to him. He took it. Above them, some of the spectators rose and bowed, the highest gesture of respect in Vulpine culture. Even some of the traditionalists stood still, saying nothing, but no longer sneering. Change had begun. And they had survived the fire together. 3 days of silence followed the crucible. No announcements. No summons. The Dominion court had retreated into deliberation, and whispers grew with each passing hour. Kale walked the palace gardens like a shadow, his body sore, muscles aching with every step. His wounds had been treated with Dominion healing salves, but exhaustion had carved itself into his bones. He wasn't sure if it was physical anymore. Valeriana barely spoke. She trained alone in the early hours, her tails moving like embers on the wind, her strikes sharp and rhythmless, unstructured, emotional. Kale watched from a distance, giving her space, until she finally approached him on the 4th night beneath the twin moons. They sat in silence beside the old flame basin that marked the resting place of her ancestors. Finally she spoke. The final trial is not one we can train for. Kale looked up from the faint flames. Then what is it? It's called the trial of soul and seed. Her voice was quieter than he'd ever heard it. It forces a ruler to face the truth of what their reign will leave behind. A test not of muscle or mind, but of legacy. He frowned. And I'm guessing it's not a written exam. Valeriana gave a bitter smile. No. We will step into the chamber of flame birth, where ancestral memory is encoded into the air itself. We'll be shown what might come, the best and worst of futures. Kale's mouth went dry. Visions? Yes. Dreams. Nightmares. Truths we may not be ready to face. If we break inside the chamber, we forfeit everything. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And what exactly do they expect us to see? She looked at him then, her golden eyes unguarded. That I'll burn the Dominion to the ground by choosing you. Kale flinched. Her voice wavered, just slightly. That our children will be weak. That I've let an outsider manipulate the bloodline for selfish affection. That by loving a human, I've lost the soul of my people. The air between them fell still. Kale reached across the flame basin and took her hand. Then we show them what love really builds. Valeriana blinked slowly. And if the chamber shows something we can't face? Then we don't run from it, Kale said. We walk through it together. She looked down at their joined hands, claws gentle against his skin. Tomorrow, she whispered, we face the fire. The chamber of flame birth sat deep within Emberthrone's mountain roots, where molten rivers carved through crystal-veined rock and the air shimmered with ancient power. Only monarchs entered. And never alone. Kale and Valeriana stood before the obsidian doors. They had been stripped of armor, dressed only in woven garments of fire silk, bare feet against stone. The chamber would know them as they were, no protection. No lies. Counselor Riezik stood beside the sealed entrance. Once inside, the chamber will show each of you what legacy awaits. It does not offer answers, only truth. Kale nodded once. We're ready. The doors parted. They stepped into darkness. Then the flames lit. Not with heat, but with memory. Kale's vision came first. He stood on a battlefield, an Earth city in ruin. Cracked towers? Federation banners in ash. Alien ships overhead. He turned and saw himself, older, hardened, leading a battalion of hybrid soldiers with orange fur, sharp ears, and golden eyes. His children. Fighting a war he had brought upon them. He looked further, and saw a charred crown beneath his foot. Valeriana, gone. His voice breaking. No, this isn't real. But it felt real. He dropped to his knees, unable to breathe. You cannot save her. A voice hissed from the fire. You'll destroy her legacy and your own. Then he felt warmth behind him. Her. Valeriana's vision came next. She stood in an empty throne room. Silent. Dust coating the banners. No guards. No advisors. No consort. Her tails dragged behind her, limp. Her fur pale. She called out, but no one answered. In her claws she held a broken blade carved from crystal. A voice whispered, You traded your people's soul for a fleeting passion. Now rule your ashes. She fell to her knees. Then a hand gripped hers. Kale. Not burning. Not broken. Still standing. In the real chamber, their bodies trembled, sweat pouring down their faces. But their hands never parted. They stood up together. And when the flame receded, the silence broke. The chamber accepted them. Trial complete. They emerged from the chamber of flame birth in silence, walking side by side beneath the weight of what they'd seen. Their clothes were damp with sweat, their faces pale. But their steps, synchronized. Sure. Unbroken. The council awaited them on the upper terrace of Emberthrone's skyward hall, the tallest point in the Dominion. From there, all could see the stars, and all could be seen. The 12 high counselors formed a half-circle before them, cloaked in ceremonial crimson robes that rippled like flame in the high winds. Counselor Riezik stood in the center, flanked by Viral and the others, their expressions unreadable. Kale and Valeriana said nothing. They had passed the trials. The law was clear. But politics rarely obeyed law. Riezik raised both arms to address the gathering. The crowd, assembled nobles, citizens, foreign dignitaries, quieted at once. By right of tradition and the ancient code, Ryuzik began, his voice carried by subtle amplifiers embedded in the platform. Valeriana, sovereign flame of the Vulpine Dominion, and Kale Dren of Terra, have completed all 3 trials, of mind, of body, and of legacy. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Ryuzik continued. The chamber has accepted their bond. Their minds remain whole. Their will unshaken. Their union is proven by the flame itself. Kale's heart beat harder in his chest. Valeriana's tails brushed lightly against his leg, grounding him. Ryuzik paused. Then, his voice dropped an octave. But there are those who dissent. Kale's jaw tightened. From the corner of his eye, Viral stepped forward. The flame may have accepted them, Viral said coolly. But the flame does not answer questions of strategy, of bloodlines, of the future. He turned to face the crowd directly. What happens when this human's descendants cannot withstand dominion biology? When our traditions are diluted to nothing by compromise and interspecies sentimentality? Kale was about to step forward, but Valeriana placed a hand on his chest. She moved past him with controlled grace and fire in her voice. You speak of blood, she said, but not of honor. You speak of tradition, but forget the roots that grew it. Her gaze swept across the crowd. My ancestors built this dominion from ash and bone, yes, but also from change. From survival. The bloodline stagnated. Our power waned. And I will not let a throne become a tomb. Viral's lip curled. This human, she continued, placing her hand firmly in Kale's, is no threat to our legacy. He is its rebirth. He is the reminder that strength comes not from purity, but from adaptability. She looked at Kale. And from choice. Silence. Then a sound Kale hadn't expected, cheering. Not a roar, but a steady rise of support. Dozens, hundreds, rising from their seats, nodding, placing claws over their chests in the Dominion salute. Ambassador Yexon fluttered his wings in symbolic agreement. Even a few of the noble families stood, notably those with daughters who had always been excluded from the bloodline debates. Ryuzik turned to the other counselors. There were nods. Reluctant. But clear. The council recognizes the results of the trial, Ryuzik said at last. Valeriana remains sovereign. And Kale Dren is named her chosen consort. The platform erupted. Some shouted. Some wept. Others looked away in bitterness. But the law had spoken. Kale turned to Valeriana, his hand still gripping hers. We actually did it, he said under his breath. She smiled, her fangs bared in pride. We did more than that. Just as they turned to walk back into the palace, a sudden sound split the air. Boom. A flash of red light. Screams. Smoke. Chaos. Kale turned, instincts taking over. One of the upper walkways had detonated. A sniper's position. The blast had come from within the palace. Another attempt. One last move. He shoved Valeriana down just as a plasma bolt seared the space where her head had been. Get down! He shouted. Guards rushed in from all sides. The crowd scattered in panic. But Kale wasn't waiting. He was already running toward the source. Kale's boots pounded across the upper walkway of the palace as sirens wailed through the towers of Emberthrone. Guards shouted behind him, but he didn't slow. His instincts were roaring louder than orders. The sniper had fired from the upper cloisters. An internal position. Someone with access. Someone trusted. He burst through a narrow door leading to the overlook where the shot had originated. The air was thick with acrid smoke, glass shards littering the floor. A body lay slumped beside a smoking tripod-mounted plasma rifle. One of Valeriana's elite guards. Dead. Throat slit. Kale crouched beside the body, checking vitals. Still warm. The blood was fresh. The guard hadn't fired the weapon. Which meant the shooter had just escaped. A sound. Behind him. Kale whirled. And nearly froze. Counselor Viral stood across the narrow corridor, cloak scorched from the explosion, a curved blade in one hand, a concealed disruptor in the other. Not hiding. Not running. Waiting. So close, Viral said, voice calm. If only you hadn't been so resilient. Kale's fists clenched. It was you. I warned her, Viral muttered, stepping forward. I begged her. But she let the throne rot for a dream. And now our people will bleed for her mistake. Funny, Kale growled. You sound more afraid of change than concerned for your people. Viral lunged. The disruptor fired, but Kale was already in motion, rolling to the side and flinging a piece of shattered glass into Viral's wrist. The weapon clattered across the floor. Blades sang as they met in a vicious tangle. Viral was fast. Trained. Dominion martial arts weren't built for elegance. They were built for lethality. But Kale didn't fight like a vulpine. He fought like a human. Wild. Tactical. Unpredictable. He blocked low, elbowed Viral in the throat, then drove a knee into the older male's ribs. Viral grunted and retaliated with a backhanded slash that grazed Kale's temple, but it was already too late. Kale grabbed him by the collar, slammed him against the wall, and pressed the counselor's own blade to his throat. Call off your loyalists, Kale growled. Now. Viral coughed, blood in his teeth. You think this ends with me? It ends tonight. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. A full unit of Ember Throne guards stormed into the corridor, led by Valeriana, her eyes burning like twin suns. She saw the blood. The bodies. The blade in Kale's hand. Then she saw Viral. The guards seized him without a word. Valeriana approached Kale, gently touching the side of his face where he bled. You're hurt. I've had worse, he muttered. But I wasn't letting him take another shot at you. She exhaled slowly, then turned to the restrained Viral. Her voice was like ice over fire. You plotted to kill your queen. And destroy our future. You will stand trial under Dominion law. Viral didn't resist. But as the guards hauled him away, he turned one last time. You've doomed us all. Valeriana didn't flinch. We just saved your people from themselves. That night, the stars over Ember Throne burned clear. Kale sat beside Valeriana on the royal balcony, their hands intertwined, their bodies bruised and quiet. You okay? He asked, eyes on the horizon. She nodded. For the first time in years. I think I am. And the people? They'll heal, she said. Like we did. Kale turned to her, voice low. What about us? She met his gaze. We're not just a bond. We're a beginning. Then she leaned in, and this time, there was no audience, no trials, no political game. Just her lips against his. Soft. Certain. Weeks passed. Ember Throne slowly shifted from a palace of unrest into a living symbol of rebirth. The court began to reform under Valeriana's guidance, old traditions carefully rewritten, not erased, and Dominion law expanded to recognize hybrid offspring as legitimate heirs. Kale stood at the center of it all. Not as a symbol. Not as a consort by name alone. But as partner, strategist, protector, and proof that strength did not require lineage. The Federation sent new ambassadors. Trade flowed stronger than ever before. Cultural exchange programs flourished, with humans learning the Dominion's philosophies and Vulpine scientists studying Terran neural adaptability. And behind closed doors, in chambers sacred to royal bloodlines, a decision was made. The Flame Bond Ceremony. Valeriana stood before her people on the night of the Twin Moons crossing, dressed in obsidian robes, her orange fur catching the firelight in radiant waves. Her tails were bound with gold thread. At her side, Kale wore formal Dominion attire, dark crimson lined with Terran navy blue, his Federation insignia displayed beneath the Queen's crest. Together, they knelt at the altar of Emberlight and spoke the ancient vows. Not bound by blood, but by choice. Not forged in flesh, but in fire. Where one walks, the other stands. Where one falls, the other rises. When it ended, she pressed her forehead against his, her claws gently brushing his jaw. You are mine, she whispered. And I am yours. Kale smiled. Flame and ash. Together. In the following months, Valeriana ruled with Kale at her side. She reformed the Dominion's education systems to integrate Terran innovation. He led joint tactical teams to prevent pirate raids along the Outer Rim. Together, they dismantled the auction networks that had once reduced sentience to merchandise. One by one, the galactic elite who profited from silence and slavery were exposed. Kale didn't forget where he'd started, standing on a display platform, humiliated but unbroken. And he made sure no one else ever had to stand there again. A year later, in the garden terrace of Emberthrone, Kale stood beside Valeriana beneath the rising twin suns. Her fur shimmered, her eyes calm. She placed his hand on her abdomen. A heartbeat. Then another. 2. He looked up, stunned. They're strong, she said softly. Stronger than either of us. Kale swallowed hard. We're really doing this. She nodded. They'll be raised with fire and freedom. And a world that knows love created them, not politics. Kale pulled her into an embrace, her tails wrapping around him like a blanket. I'm ready, he whispered. So am I. From the ashes of old power, a new dynasty rose. Not one of blood or fear, but of unity. Of strength and difference. Of fire that did not burn, but illuminated. And across the stars the story spread. Of a human warrior who faced the auction block and refused to bow. Of a Vulpine queen who chose love over legacy, and found both. Of a bond that reshaped empires. And in time, as their children played in the garden where war once brewed, Kale whispered to them. Remember this, true power doesn't come from being born strong. It comes from choosing to rise when the galaxy says you can't. And the flame burned on.